Many people are familiar with the story of the babysitter who never made it through the night. It has been told for decades, passed down through movies, sleepovers, and warnings whispered after dark. Most people assume it's fiction. But in March of 1950, in a small town in Missouri, something very similar actually happened. And unlike the legend, this story never found an ending. Some stories sound impossible, the kind you'd expect to be exaggerated or completely made up, but every detail you're about to hear actually happened. No embellishment, no dramatization, just events that unfolded exactly as they did, even when they stopped making sense. This is unhinged, but true. Columbia, Missouri was a quiet, close-knit town surrounded by farmland and long, empty roads. In the winter of 1950, it was the kind of place where people recognized each other by name, and doors were often left unlocked. It was here that 13-year-old Janet Christman lived with her parents and two younger sisters. Janet was known as dependable. She sang in her church choir. She played piano in the evenings. She babysat often, usually for families her parents already knew and trusted. On Saturday, March 18th, Janet had planned to attend a dance with friends, but earlier that day, the phone rang. It was Ann Romack, a family friend, asking if Janet could babysit that night. Janet had been saving money for a burgundy Easter dress, so she agreed. That decision would change everything. The Romacks had recently moved into a rural home at 1015 Stewart Road, just outside of town. The house sat away from neighbors, surrounded by darkness once the sun went down. Anne was pregnant. She and her husband, Ed, hadn't had a night out together in a long time. They planned to spend the evening playing cards with friends. Janet's father dropped her off around 7:30 p.m. Rain was coming down hard, and the air was already cold. Inside, Janet was told the Romacks' 3-year-old son, Gregory, was already asleep upstairs. It was expected to be a quiet night. Janet set her coat down. She walked through the living room. She glanced up the stairs toward the dark hallway where Gregory slept. Because of how isolated the home was, Ed Romack showed Janet the shotgun kept near the door. He demonstrated how to load it, how to unload it, where the safety was. Then he reminded her of one rule: do not open the door for anyone. If someone knocked, she was to turn on the porch light, nothing more. Janet nodded. She said she understood. Before leaving, Anne told Janet she would call once they arrived at their destination. Then the Romacks drove away. Inside the house, Janet settled in. She lightly checked on Gregory, just opening the door enough to see him breathing. She went into the kitchen, opened cabinets, and poured herself something to drink. She turned on a lamp in the living room. Outside, the weather worsened. The temperature dropped into the 20s. Wind pushed freezing rain against the windows. At some point, Anne called to check in. There was no answer. She assumed Janet had fallen asleep. At the Columbia Police Department, Officer Ray McCowan had just started his shift. Around 10:30 p.m., the phone rang. When he answered, he heard a young woman's voice, distant, strained. He asked where she was. What came next wasn't words. It was screaming. Then the line went dead. The call couldn't be traced. No address appeared. No follow-up calls came in. Just after midnight, the Romacks decided to head home. They arrived around 1 a.m. As Ed pulled into the driveway, something immediately stood out. The porch light was on. He knew they had left it off. When they reached the door, they found it unlocked. Inside, the house was silent. Janet was lying on the floor. She had been strangled. She had been beaten. Nearby, the phone hung off its hook. Anne ran upstairs. She checked on Gregory. He was unharmed. He had slept through the entire night. Ed called the police. Because the home sat just outside city limits, both the Columbia Police Department and the Boone County Sheriff's Office responded. Instead of working together, the two departments argued over jurisdiction. Information wasn't shared. Coordination suffered. Investigators determined Janet had fought back. Blood was found in the kitchen and in the living room. The back door was unlocked. Outside, male footprints were discovered near a broken side window. A garden hoe lay nearby. Search dogs followed a scent trail, nearly a mile before losing it. Hundreds of interviews followed: friends, family, students at Janet's school, local residents. Nothing led to an arrest. The crime reminded investigators of another murder in Columbia 4 years earlier. A 20-year-old woman named Mary Lou Jenkins had been killed less than a mile away. A man was accused, then released. As the investigation continued, attention turned to Robert Mueller. He was 27 years old, a longtime friend of Ed Romack. He had served in World War II, worked at his father's restaurant. To most people, he seemed ordinary. But Ed later told police Mueller had made disturbing comments about young women, including Janet. He also speculated about how the killer might have entered the house in a way that closely matched the evidence. Still, there was no physical proof. No arrest was made. Years passed. Janet Christman's murder became a cold case. The details blurred. The story spread, and eventually it became a legend about a babysitter and a phone call that came from inside the house. But in Columbia, Missouri, it was never a story. It was a 13-year-old girl who went to work one night and never came home, and whoever killed her was never found. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel.